I never thought my backup generator would become the most controversial piece of equipment in Riverside Heights. But here we are, standing in my driveway at 7 in the morning with 3 angry HOA board members pointing their fingers at my perfectly legal Honda EU 7000 IS. My name is Owen Valmont, and I have lived in this subdivision of Milwaukee, Wisconsin for 6 years. I am an electrical engineer by trade, which means I understand power systems better than most people understand their morning coffee routine. When I moved into this neighborhood back in 2020, I did my homework. I read every single page of the HOA covenants, conditions, and restrictions. Not once did those documents mention generators, backup power systems, or noise ordinances beyond the standard city regulations. The woman leading this morning's assault was named Patricia Wainwright, a 52-year-old real estate agent who had served as HOA president for the past 4 years. She wore her blonde hair in that aggressive bob cut that seemed to be standard issue for neighborhood busybodies, and her voice had that particular pitch that could cut through concrete. "Mr. Valmont, we have received 17 complaints about your generator," Patricia said, holding up her phone like it contained evidence of a federal crime. 17 homeowners have contacted the board about the noise pollution you created during last week's power outage. I wiped the sweat from my forehead. I had been cleaning my gutters when this delegation arrived. "Patricia, the power was out for 14 hours. My generator kept my sump pump running, my refrigerator cold, and my home office operational so I could work. That's exactly what it's designed to do." The man standing to Patricia's left was named Gerald Hutchins, the HOA treasurer and a retired insurance adjuster who treated every conversation like a deposition. The generator manual clearly states it produces 72 decibels at rated load. That's equivalent to a vacuum cleaner running continuously. "At 7 meters distance," I corrected him. "My nearest neighbor is 40 feet away, and I positioned the generator in my backyard, another 30 feet from the property line. The actual noise level at their house would be around 55 decibels, which is quieter than normal conversation." The third member of this impromptu tribunal was named Sharon Kelsey, the HOA secretary, a woman who spent most of her time documenting every perceived violation in the neighborhood with the dedication of a Cold War spy. She held a leather folder that I knew contained photographs, probably taken from multiple angles with timestamps. "The issue is not the technical specifications," Sharon said, her voice dripping with rehearsed authority. "The issue is that you created a disturbance during a neighborhood emergency without seeking prior approval from the board." I stared at her. Prior approval for using my generator during a power outage? How exactly would that work? "Should I send an email while the power is out and wait for your response before starting it?" Patricia's face turned that particular shade of red that indicated I had committed the cardinal sin of using logic against HOA regulations. "Do not take that tone with me, Mr. Valmont. The board held an emergency meeting yesterday, and we have voted unanimously to implement a new policy regarding backup generators. Effective immediately, all generators must be approved by the board before use, and they may only operate between the hours of 9 a.m. and 6 p.m. "That's insane," I said, trying to keep my voice level. "Power outages do not follow a schedule. The whole point of a backup generator is to provide power when the grid fails, which can happen at any time." Gerald pulled out a printed document from his briefcase. "We have drafted an amendment to the community rules. You will find that Section 12, Paragraph 7 now explicitly addresses backup power systems and the requirements for their use." I took the document and scanned through it. The language was deliberately vague and punitive. any generator operation required 48 hours written notice to the board. Usage was restricted to daytime hours. Violations would result in fines starting at $500 for the first offense, doubling for each subsequent violation. There was even a clause requiring homeowners to provide alternative arrangements for neighbors who might be disturbed by generator noise. You cannot enforce this, I said. First, you cannot retroactively punish me for something that was not against the rules when I did it. Second, this amendment was not properly noticed to the community. HOA bylaws require 30 days notice before any rule changes. Patricia smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. We invoked our emergency powers under Article 6 of the bylaws. When immediate action is required to protect the health, safety, and welfare of the community, the board may implement temporary rules with a unanimous vote. This policy is temporary pending a full community vote at next month's meeting. This has nothing to do with health or safety, I protested. This is about you flexing your authority because a few people complained about hearing a generator during a power outage. Sharon stepped forward, her folder now open to reveal glossy photographs of my generator sitting on my patio. We have documented evidence that your generator was operating at 11:30 p.m., well past what any reasonable person would consider acceptable hours. Mrs. Deborah Chen, who lives 3 houses down, has a newborn baby who was woken up by the noise. Mr. and Mrs. Patterson, who are both in their 70s, were unable to sleep due to the disturbance. I felt my frustration building. The Pattersons have a generator too. I saw it in their garage last summer when they had their estate sale, which they have never operated during nighttime hours, Gerald interjected smoothly. Your behavior was inconsiderate and disruptive. Let me get this straight, I said, holding up the document. If there is a power outage at midnight and my sump pump stops working and my basement starts flooding, I cannot run my generator to prevent thousands of dollars in water damage because it might disturb someone's sleep. Patricia nodded. You may call a plumber or use manual methods to address the water. Many homeowners have successfully dealt with such situations without resorting to noisy generators. I laughed, and it came out harsher than I intended. Manual methods. Do you mean carrying buckets of water up from my basement all night? Have you ever actually dealt with a sump pump failure during heavy rain? Your sarcasm is not appreciated, Patricia said coldly. The policy is in effect as of this moment. If you operate your generator outside the approved hours or without proper notification, you will be fined. Continued violations may result in legal action to enforce compliance. They left my driveway in Patricia's silver Lexus SUV, and I stood there holding their ridiculous document, trying to process what had just happened. I went inside and called my lawyer, a guy named Marcus Reed who had helped me with my house closing years ago. Marcus listened to my explanation and asked me to email him the document. 20 minutes later, he called me back. Owen, this is a mess, but they are technically within their rights to invoke emergency powers, Marcus said. The question is whether a court would agree that generator noise constitutes an emergency requiring immediate action. My gut says no, but challenging this would cost you several $1,000s in legal fees and you might not win. So what do? I asked. You have a few options. 1. You comply with their policy and attend the community meeting next month to vote against making it permanent. 2. You ignore the policy and prepare for a legal battle. 3. You find a workaround that technically complies with their rules while still meeting your needs. I thought about that third option. What kind of workaround? Well, they restricted generators specifically. Do they say anything about other backup power systems? I reread the document carefully. The language specifically mentioned internal combustion generators and portable power generators. It said nothing about battery systems, solar installations, or other alternative power sources. "Marcus, you are a genius," I said. "I am just a lawyer who reads documents carefully," he replied. "But before you do anything, make sure you document everything. Keep copies of all communications. Record any interactions with the board if Wisconsin is a one-party consent state for recordings." "It is," I confirmed. Wisconsin law allowed me to record conversations I was part of without notifying the other parties. Then protect yourself. HOA disputes can get ugly fast. He had no idea how right he was. Over the next week, I researched battery backup systems extensively. What I learned was fascinating and deeply ironic. A properly designed lithium battery system with solar charging could provide everything my generator did, but completely silently. The initial cost was steep, around $30,000 for a system that could run my essential loads for 24 hours, but I had the savings and, more importantly, I had a point to prove. I contacted 3 companies and got quotes. The best option came from a Milwaukee-based installer called Great Lakes Solar and Energy. Their lead designer, a woman named Wendy Jackson, came to my house and spent 3 hours evaluating my electrical system, my roof orientation, and my power needs. Wendy was in her mid-30s, with dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, and the kind of competence that came from years of actual hands-on work. She climbed into my attic, inspected my electrical panel, measured my roof angles, and took notes on a tablet. "You have a perfect south-facing roof section," Wendy said, as we stood in my backyard looking up at my house. "With your power consumption patterns and the equipment you want to back up, I would recommend a 15 kilowatt-hour battery system with a 6 kilowatt solar array. During normal operation, the solar panels will reduce your electricity bill and keep the batteries topped off. During an outage, you can run your sump pump, refrigerator, and essential circuits for about 30 hours before the batteries are depleted." "What if the outage lasts longer than that?" I asked. "If it is sunny, the solar panels will recharge the batteries even during the outage, extending your runtime indefinitely. If it is cloudy or nighttime, you will eventually need another power source. But honestly, power outages in this area rarely last more than a day." "Except when they do," I said, thinking about the ice storm 2 winters ago that had knocked out power for 4 days. Wendy nodded. "True. If you want extended backup capability, we can add more battery capacity, but that significantly increases the cost. Another option is to keep your generator as a secondary backup. You run the batteries first, silently, and only fire up the generator if the outage extends beyond your battery capacity." That was perfect. "How long for installation?" 2 weeks for permits, 1 week for installation. "We need city approval for the solar panels and electrical inspection for the battery system and transfer switch." I signed the contract that afternoon. The system cost $32,000 after the federal solar tax credit, but it was worth every penny. Not because I needed it, but because of what would happen when I stopped being the neighborhood's backup power source. See, there was something Patricia and her board cronies did not know. Something I had never mentioned because it had never been relevant until now. My generator did not just power my house during outages. For the past 3 years, I had been running extension cords to 4 of my neighbors' houses whenever the power went out, keeping their sump pumps operational. Milwaukee sits on the western shore of Lake Michigan, and our neighborhood was built on what used to be wetlands. Every house in Riverside Heights has a sump pump, and most of them have 2. When it rains hard, the water table rises, and those pumps are the only thing standing between a dry basement and a flooded disaster. I knew this because I had engineered my own drainage system when I moved in, installing a battery backup sump pump in addition to my primary unit. Most of my neighbors were not as prepared. The Chens, 3 houses down, had a primary sump pump and nothing else. The Pattersons, who apparently could not sleep through my generator noise, had an old sump pump that probably predated their mortgage. The Kowalskis next door had 2 pumps but no backup power. The Hendersons across the street were in the same boat. During outages, I had always run heavy-duty extension cords to these houses, powering their sump pumps from my generator. I did not make a big deal about it. I did not ask for money or even much acknowledgement. It was just the neighborly thing to do, and it gave me peace of mind knowing that flooding in their basements would not eventually affect the whole neighborhood's property values or infrastructure. But if the HOA wanted to play games about my generator, then I would play too. And my new game involved being extremely compliant with their rules while helping exactly nobody but myself. The installation crew from Great Lakes Solar and Energy showed up on a Tuesday morning with a truck full of equipment. Wendy supervised personally, directing her team of 4 installers as they mounted solar panels on my roof, bolted battery units to my basement wall, and installed a sophisticated transfer switch that would automatically shift my house to battery power within milliseconds of detecting a grid failure. Patricia drove by slowly that afternoon, her Lexus crawling past my house at about 5 miles per hour as she craned her neck to see what was happening. I waved cheerfully from my front yard. She did not wave back. The installation took 3 days. On Friday afternoon, Wendy walked me through the monitoring system, showing me how I could check battery charge levels, solar production, and power consumption from an app on my phone. "You are all set," Wendy said, shaking my hand. "The system is online and charging. You have got full backup power now, completely silent and totally legal under your HOA rules." "They are going to hate this," I said. Wendy grinned. "Good solar installations often make HOAs mad. They cannot ban them because of federal law, but they sure try sometimes." "You did everything by the book, though. Permits, inspections, proper installation. They cannot touch you." She was right. The Solar Rights Act prevented HOAs from prohibiting solar installations, and my battery system was simply part of that installation. Patricia could complain all she wanted, but legally, she had no ground to stand on. 2 weeks passed quietly. My solar panels generated power during the day, my batteries stayed charged, and my electric bill dropped by about 60%. I monitored the weather forecasts obsessively, waiting for the next storm. It came on a Saturday in late April. The National Weather Service issued a severe thunderstorm warning for Milwaukee County, predicting heavy rain, high winds, and possible flooding. I checked my battery system that morning. 100% charged, ready for anything. The storm hit around 2 p.m. Rain pounded down in sheets, turning streets into rivers within minutes. Thunder cracked so loud my windows rattled, and then, inevitably, the power went out. My lights flickered once, and then my transfer switch kicked in. Batteries took over seamlessly. My refrigerator kept humming. My sump pump continued its regular cycle, pumping water out every few minutes as the groundwater level rose. My internet router stayed online. I was completely comfortable. I did not run extension cords to my neighbors' houses. I sat in my living room, watching the rain through my window, listening to the sound of my sump pump doing its job. Around 3:30 p.m., I saw Gerald Hutchins splashing through the rain to the Kowalskis' house next door. He knocked on their door, spoke briefly with Mr. Kowalski, and then ran back to his car. At 4 p.m., I saw Mr. Patterson across the street standing in his garage, staring at his generator, scratching his head. He looked toward my house, and I knew what he was thinking. Usually by now, I would have come over with my extension cords. Not today. My phone rang at 4:15. It was Sharon Kelsey. "Owen, this is Sharon from the HOA board. We are organizing community assistance for the power outage. Several residents need help with their sump pumps. Can you provide generator support like you normally do?" "I am sorry, Sharon, but I cannot," I said pleasantly. The board banned generator operation during emergencies without 48 hours advance notice. Since I did not know about this power outage 48 hours ago, I cannot legally operate my generator under HOA rules. There was a long pause. "Owen, people's basements are going to flood." "That sounds like an emergency," I agreed. "Perhaps the board should invoke its emergency powers to temporarily suspend the generator restrictions. You know we cannot do that on a Saturday afternoon. We need a unanimous board vote. Then I guess you should schedule an emergency meeting. My battery backup system is keeping my house running fine, but my generator is off limits per your policy. I am just following the rules." Sharon hung up without another word. The rain continued for 6 hours. The power stayed out until almost 11 p.m. During that time, I watched the neighborhood descend into chaos from the comfort of my well-lit, fully powered home. Around 5 p.m., a plumber's van showed up at the Chen house. I knew what was happening. Their sump pump had failed without power, and water was flooding their basement. The plumber could not restore power, but he could probably set up a temporary gas-powered pump. That would cost the Chens at least $1,000 for emergency weekend service, plus whatever water damage had already occurred. At 6 p.m., I saw Mr. Henderson trying to run a generator in his garage. I actually walked over for that one, because running a generator in an enclosed space is a great way to die from carbon monoxide poisoning. "Mr. Henderson, you need to move that outside," I called out over the rain. "Running it in your garage will kill you." He looked at me with desperate eyes. "My basement has 6 inches of water already. I cannot get this thing to start." "Is it your first time running it?" I asked. "I bought it 5 years ago but never used it," he admitted. "The fuel probably went bad." "You need fresh gas and probably a carburetor cleaning. But seriously, if you get it running, move it outside or you will die from the fumes." I went back to my house, and I felt a small twinge of guilt, but only small. Mr. Henderson had been one of the 17 complainants about my generator noise. He had signed a letter to the board calling my generator an unconscionable disturbance to the peaceful enjoyment of his property. Those were his exact words. Patricia had read them aloud at the board meeting where they banned generator use. Now his basement was flooding, and his generator would not start, and I was not helping. Play stupid games, win wet basements. The power came back on at 10:48 p.m. I know the exact time because my monitoring app logged when my house switched from battery back to grid power. My batteries had used about 40% of their capacity. The solar panels would recharge them completely by tomorrow afternoon. Sunday morning, I went for my usual run around the neighborhood. The damage was obvious. The Chens had a Serve Pro disaster restoration truck in their driveway. The Kowalskis had 3 industrial fans running in their open garage, pointed down toward their basement stairs. The Hendersons had a pile of ruined boxes and furniture at their curb, waiting for bulk trash pickup. Mr. Kowalski caught me as I jogged past. "Owen, what happened yesterday? We waited for you to bring over the extension cords." I stopped, breathing hard from my run. I could not run my generator, Mr. Kowalski. The HOA banned it. What? That's insane. Take it up with Patricia, I said. She told me I need 48 hours advance notice to run my generator during a power outage. Since I cannot predict the future, I cannot comply with that requirement, so I cannot run it at all. His face went pale. Our basement got 8 inches of water. We lost everything in our storage area. 20 years of Christmas decorations, our kids' baby clothes, photo albums. I am sorry to hear that, I said, and I meant it. But the HOA was very clear. Generator noise is unacceptable. Who complained? Who said they had a problem with it? Patricia mentioned 17 homeowners signed complaints. She did not give me the full list. Mr. Kowalski turned and walked back to his house without another word. The emergency HOA meeting was called for Wednesday evening at the community clubhouse. I received an email about it on Monday morning. The agenda had one item: discussion and vote regarding temporary generator policy. I showed up 15 minutes early and took a seat in the back row. The room filled up quickly. I counted at least 60 homeowners, which was remarkable considering our subdivision had only 93 houses. HOA meetings typically drew maybe 15 people, mostly retirees with nothing better to do. Patricia called the meeting to order at 7 p.m. sharp. She looked rattled, which gave me a small amount of satisfaction. "Thank you all for coming," Patricia began. "As many of you experienced firsthand, this past Saturday's power outage created significant challenges for our community. The board has received numerous complaints and concerns regarding the temporary generator policy we implemented 2 weeks ago. Tonight we will discuss whether to rescind that policy." "Rescind it?" A man in the third row stood up. I recognized him as Tom Martinez, who lived on the west side of the subdivision. "How about we discuss why you implemented such a stupid policy in the first place?" Several people applauded. Patricia's face turned red. "Mr. Martinez, there is no need for that language. The policy was implemented in response to legitimate complaints about generator noise during the previous outage." "Who complained?" Mr. Kowalski called out from the front row. "I want names." Gerald Hutchins stood up, smoothing his tie nervously. "The board does not disclose the identities of residents who file complaints. That would violate their privacy and potentially subject them to harassment." "My basement flooded because I could not run my sump pump," a woman shouted from the middle of the room. I did not recognize her. "I lost $10,000 worth of belongings. If someone complained about generator noise and caused this policy, they should pay for my damages." The room erupted in overlapping arguments. Patricia banged her gavel repeatedly, trying to restore order. "Please, everyone, let's maintain decorum," Patricia said desperately. "The purpose of tonight's meeting is to address the policy going forward. The board acknowledges that the restrictions may have been overly broad." "May have been." Mr. Henderson stood up. "I tried to run my generator to save my basement, and it would not start because I never maintained it. You know why I never maintained it? Because my neighbor Owen always took care of everyone's sump pumps during outages with his generator. The generator you banned. The one that kept my basement dry for 3 years. Everyone turned to look at me. I gave a small wave. Patricia glared in my direction. Mr. Valmont's generator was excessively loud and disturbed numerous residents. "I would rather be disturbed than flooded," someone yelled. A woman in her 60s stood up near the front. I recognized her as Deborah Chen's mother-in-law, who had been staying with them to help with their new baby. "My daughter-in-law's basement flooded with sewage backup during the storm. We had to evacuate the baby to a hotel. We have $10,000 in cleanup costs." If generator noise bothered people, they could have used earplugs. Sharon Kelsey tried to regain control. The original complaints were legitimate. Multiple residents reported sleep disturbances, stress, and inability to enjoy their homes during the previous outage. Then those residents can flood their basements next time, Mr. Martinez shot back. The rest of us want generators to be legal. Patricia banged her gavel again. We will now vote on rescinding the temporary generator policy. All in favor. A forest of hands went up. I counted at least 50. Opposed, 3 hands. Patricia, Gerald, and Sharon. The motion passes, Patricia said stiffly. The temporary generator policy is rescinded effective immediately. I have another motion, Mr. Kowalski stood up. I move that we compensate Owen Valmont for the generator fuel and maintenance he has provided to this community for the past 3 years, and I move that we formally apologize for implementing a policy that prevented him from helping his neighbors. Second, shouted at least a dozen voices. Patricia looked like she had swallowed a lemon. That motion is out of order. Compensation for voluntary actions is not an appropriate use of HOA funds. Then, I move for a vote of no confidence in the current board, Mr. Martinez called out. This disaster was entirely preventable, and the board's incompetence has cost this community tens of thousands of dollars in flood damage. The room exploded in argument again. I watched Patricia try to maintain control, but she had lost the crowd. People were shouting over each other, demanding board resignations, threatening lawsuits, and generally venting 3 years of accumulated frustration with Patricia's dictatorial management style. Finally, I stood up. The room gradually quieted down as people noticed. I want to say something, I announced. My voice carried in the suddenly silent room. I appreciate everyone's support, and I understand people are angry about what happened Saturday, but I need to be clear about something. I am not running extension cords to your houses anymore. Shocked faces stared at me. For 3 years, I provided backup power to my neighbors out of goodwill and community spirit. 2 weeks ago, the board told me that my generator was an unconscionable noise disturbance. 17 homeowners apparently agreed. I do not know who all 17 were, but I do know that some of the houses I was powering were among the complainants. Mr. Patterson, I saw you sign that letter. Mr. Patterson slumped in his seat, looking at the floor. So here is the new reality, I continued. I installed a $32,000 solar and battery system that powers my house silently during outages. My sump pumps work. My refrigerator works. My internet works. I am completely self-sufficient now. But that system only powers my house. I do not have extension cords long enough to reach your houses, and even if I did, I would not use them. You wanted quiet during outages. You have got it. My backup system is silent. It is also exclusively mine. The room was dead silent. That's not fair, someone protested weakly. Fair. I laughed. What was not fair was banning my generator after I spent 3 years keeping your basements dry. What was not fair was Patricia and her board treating me like a criminal for being a good neighbor. You want backup power? Install your own systems. Solar, batteries, generators, whatever. But I am done subsidizing this neighborhood's electrical infrastructure. I walked out of the meeting. Behind me, the shouting started again, but I did not care. I got in my car and drove home. 2 days later, I received a formal letter from the HOA board. It was not an apology. Instead, it was a notice that the board was implementing a new community resilience assessment fee of $200 per household to fund a study on neighborhood backup power options. The letter was signed by all 3 board members. I called Marcus Reed again. They are retaliating, I told him after explaining the new fee. This is targeted harassment because I made them look bad at the meeting. Marcus sighed. Probably, but it is clever. They are applying the fee to everyone, not just you. They can claim it is a legitimate assessment for a community purpose. Fighting it would be difficult. So they just get away with it. Unless enough homeowners vote them out at the next election, yes. HOA boards have broad authority to levy assessments. The only real check on that power is voting. When is the next board election? According to your bylaws, annual elections are in June. That is next month. I thanked Marcus and hung up. Then I started making phone calls. Over the next 3 weeks, I contacted every homeowner I could reach. I explained the situation, the history of the generator ban, the flood damage from the storm, and the retaliatory assessment fee. Most people were sympathetic, but sympathy did not translate to action. HOA elections typically had abysmal turnout, and Patricia had won her last 3 elections unopposed. What I needed was candidates willing to run against the current board. I found them in unexpected places. Mr. Kowalski agreed to run for president. He was retired military, a logistics officer who had managed supply chains for Army bases. He knew how to organize, and he was angry about his flooded basement. Wendy Jackson, my solar installer, lived in the neighborhood. I had not known that until I saw her name on the community directory. When I called her, she was shocked. I have lived here for 2 years and never been to an HOA meeting, Wendy admitted. I did not even know there was drama. There is always drama when Patricia is involved, I said. We need someone on the board who understands backup power systems and can make intelligent policy decisions. You are literally the most qualified person in the neighborhood. I do not have time for HOA politics, Wendy protested. 2 meetings a month, maybe 4 hours total. Less time than you spend on a single installation job, and you will prevent idiotic policies like the generator ban. She agreed to run for secretary. For treasurer, we recruited a certified public accountant named Richard Feng who lived 2 streets over and had been quietly furious about HOA financial mismanagement for years. The election was scheduled for the 3rd Tuesday in June. Patricia and her allies fought back hard. They sent out campaign letters claiming the opposition slate would raise fees, allow neighborhood decay, and destroy property values. They held a candidates forum at the clubhouse where Gerald Hutchins grilled our candidates about their lack of experience with community governance. Mr. Kowalski handled that perfectly. I governed supply chains for military bases with populations larger than this subdivision. I think I can manage 93 houses. The vote was held via paper ballot, with results tallied that evening. I volunteered as an observer, watching as Sharon Kelsey and 2 neutral homeowners counted ballots at a table in the clubhouse. The turnout was unprecedented. 72 homeowners voted, either in person or by proxy. In a normal year, maybe 30 ballots came in. The results were decisive. Mr. Kowalski won the presidency with 58 votes to Patricia's 14. Wendy Jackson won secretary with 61 votes to Sharon's 11. Richard Feng ran unopposed for treasurer after Gerald Hutchins withdrew from the race at the last minute, citing health concerns. Patricia's face when the results were announced was the picture of bitter defeat. She gathered her papers, stuffed them into her designer handbag, and walked out of the clubhouse without a word. The new board held its first meeting a week later. I attended, along with about 20 other homeowners who wanted to see the changing of the guard. Mr. Kowalski's first action as president was to rescind the Community Resilience Assessment fee. His second action was to form a committee to research backup power options for the neighborhood. His third action was to issue a formal apology to me on behalf of the HOA for the generator ban and its consequences. The previous board acted hastily and without proper consideration of community needs, Mr. Kowalski read from a prepared statement. Owen Valmont provided valuable assistance to his neighbors for years, and rather than thanking him, the board punished him. On behalf of this HOA, I apologize for that injustice. Several people applauded. I nodded my acknowledgement but said nothing. The Backup Power Committee met throughout July and August. Wendy chaired it, bringing her technical expertise to bear on the problem. They researched group purchasing programs for generators, community battery systems, and even a proposal for a neighborhood microgrid powered by solar panels on the clubhouse roof. In September, the committee presented its recommendations to the full HOA. They proposed a voluntary backup power program where homeowners could purchase generators or battery systems at group discount rates negotiated with suppliers. They also recommended amending the HOA covenants to explicitly protect generator use during power outages, with reasonable noise mitigation requirements like positioning generators away from bedrooms and using the quietest models available. The community voted overwhelmingly to adopt the recommendations. Within 2 months, 18 households had installed new backup power systems. Generator test days became a regular weekend occurrence as people learned how to maintain their equipment properly. In early October, another major storm hit Milwaukee. This one was worse than the April storm, a massive weather system that brought tornado warnings and flash flooding. The power went out at 6 p.m. on a Friday and stayed out until Sunday morning. I sat in my living room, running on battery power, monitoring my phone app as my solar panels and batteries kept everything running smoothly. But this time, I was not the only house with lights on. Up and down my street, I could see the glow of powered homes. I could hear the distant hum of generators, properly positioned and well-maintained, keeping basements dry and families comfortable. Mr. Kowalski called me around 8 p.m. "Owen, we have got a situation. The Hendersons' generator died and their basement is starting to flood. They are both elderly, and I do not think they can handle bailing water. Any chance you could run a cord over there?" I thought about it for a moment. The old me would have said no out of spite. The Hendersons had complained about my generator noise. They had contributed to the ban that caused so much damage. But holding grudges is exhausting, and they were old and scared. "Give me 10 minutes, I said. I pulled my Honda generator out of storage, where it had been sitting unused since my solar installation. I filled it with fresh fuel, checked the oil, and wheeled it to my backyard. I started it up, and it roared to life with that familiar mechanical growl. I ran a heavy-duty extension cord across the street to the Henderson house. Mr. Henderson met me at his door, and I could see tears in his eyes. "Owen, I am so sorry about everything. The complaint letter, the noise, all of it. We were stupid and selfish." "It's okay," I said, because what else could I say? "Let's keep your basement dry." I connected the extension cord to their sump pump circuit, and immediately I heard the pump kick in, working hard to catch up with the rising water. Mr. Henderson gripped my hand like a drowning man holding a lifeline. "Thank you," he whispered. I went back home, but I kept my generator running through the night. Not just for the Hendersons, but also running 2 more cords to houses that had installed generators but were having mechanical problems. Because that is what neighbors do, even when those neighbors have been difficult in the past. The power came back Sunday morning. I disconnected my extension cords, serviced my generator, and put it back in storage. My solar batteries had handled my house perfectly, but I was glad I had kept the generator for backup. Monday morning, I found a handwritten note in my mailbox. It was from Mrs. Henderson. thanking me again for helping them during the outage. She had enclosed a $50 bill for the fuel and your trouble. I did not cash it, but I kept the note. Over the following months, the neighborhood settled into a new normal. The Backup Power Committee continued meeting, now focused on maintaining the equipment people had installed and sharing best practices. Wendy organized quarterly generator maintenance workshops where homeowners could bring their equipment and learn how to service it properly. Patricia Wainwright moved out of the neighborhood in December. I heard through the grapevine that she took a job in Phoenix and wanted a fresh start. Her house sold quickly, purchased by a young couple with 2 kids who immediately joined the Backup Power Committee. Sharon Kelsey remained in the neighborhood but kept a low profile. I occasionally saw her at community events, and we exchanged polite nods but nothing more. Gerald Hutchins actually apologized to me at a holiday party, admitting that the generator ban had been ill-considered and poorly executed. I let Patricia push that through without thinking about the consequences, Gerald said over a plastic cup of punch. I should have known better. I spent 30 years evaluating risks for an insurance company, and I completely failed to evaluate the risk of flooding versus the risk of noise complaints. We all make mistakes, I said, and I meant it. The new board proved dramatically more competent than the old one. Mr. Kowalski ran meetings efficiently, focusing on actual problems rather than petty grievances. Richard Feng discovered that the previous treasurer had been misallocating funds, paying for personal expenses under the guise of board business. Nothing criminal, just wasteful spending on expensive dinners and unnecessary travel. Richard implemented strict budgeting controls and transparent accounting. Wendy Jackson became the neighborhood's unofficial energy consultant, helping anyone who asked to evaluate their power needs and design backup systems. She installed solar and batteries on 3 more houses in the subdivision, and 2 more households hired other companies to do similar installations. By spring of the next year, Riverside Heights had transformed from a neighborhood dependent on a single homeowner's generator to a resilient community where most households could weather extended power outages independently. The HOA even installed a battery backup system for the clubhouse, allowing it to serve as an emergency shelter during extended outages. I thought about how much drama could have been avoided if Patricia had simply talked to me instead of banning my generator. But then again, conflict sometimes forces necessary change. Without the generator ban and the resulting flood damage, the neighborhood might have remained dependent on me indefinitely. Now we had distributed resilience, with dozens of households taking responsibility for their own backup power. In June, I attended the annual HOA meeting where the board presented the year's accomplishments. They highlighted the backup power program, the improved financial transparency, and the new community emergency response plan. At the end of the meeting, Mr. Kowalski asked me to stand up. I want to publicly recognize Owen Valmont, he said. Owen could have remained bitter about how he was treated. Instead, he continued helping his neighbors, he participated constructively in improving our community, and he set an example of resilience and technical competence that inspired many of us to take backup power seriously. Owen, on behalf of this community, thank you. Everyone applauded. I felt my face turning red, uncomfortable with the attention but also genuinely touched by the recognition. After the meeting, several people came up to thank me personally. The Chens, whose basement had flooded with sewage during that first storm, had since installed a battery backup system and wanted my advice on optimizing it. The Kowalskis invited me to a barbecue the following weekend. Even people I barely knew stopped to shake my hand and express appreciation. Walking home that evening, I reflected on the whole absurd saga. It started with a noise complaint and escalated into an HOA civil war, complete with flood damage, political upheaval, and ultimately community transformation. My $32,000 solar system had been an expensive statement of principle, but it had forced the neighborhood to confront its vulnerability and take action. I still have that system, and I still love it. My electric bills are minimal. My house has power during every outage, and I have the satisfaction of knowing I am generating clean energy. But I also keep my Honda generator maintained and ready, because sometimes being a good neighbor means having the ability to help when help is needed. The generator sits in my garage now, serviced and fueled, a mechanical insurance policy against the next emergency. I have used it twice since the Henderson incident, both times to help neighbors whose systems failed during outages. I do not advertise that I have it, and I do not run extension cords to every house on the street anymore. But when someone genuinely needs help, it is there. Patricia never apologized, not that I expected her to. People like her rarely acknowledge their mistakes. They just move on to the next place where they can exercise authority over others. I hope she learned something from the experience, but I doubt it. Some people are hardwired to control and regulate, unable to tolerate the messy freedom of neighbors helping neighbors without bureaucratic oversight. The irony is that her generator ban accomplished the opposite of what she intended. Instead of silencing my generator, it sparked a neighborhood-wide adoption of backup power systems. Instead of asserting HOA control over emergency preparedness, it demonstrated the limits of that control and the importance of individual resilience. Instead of punishing me, it ended her political career and led to comprehensive HOA reform. Sometimes the best revenge is not revenge at all, but simply allowing someone's bad decisions to run their natural course. Patricia banned my generator. I went silent, and her allies' sump pumps failed. Cause and effect, action and consequence, entirely predictable for anyone who understood the systems involved. I am an electrical engineer. I understand systems. I understand that power grids fail, that water tables rise, that sump pumps require electricity to function. I understand that backup power is not a luxury, but a necessity in a neighborhood built on reclaimed wetlands. Patricia never understood any of that, and her ignorance cost people thousands of dollars in flood damage. But the neighborhood recovered, learned, and adapted. We are stronger now than we were before the generator ban. We have better leadership, better emergency preparedness, and better community cohesion. People who never spoke to each other before now coordinate on generator maintenance and share backup power strategies. The quarterly meetings of the Backup Power Committee draw 20 to 30 people, more than general HOA meetings used to attract. Last month, a representative from the city's emergency management department visited one of our committee meetings. They wanted to learn about our distributed backup power approach as a model for other neighborhoods. Wendy gave a presentation about the systems people had installed and the lessons we had learned. The city representative took extensive notes and said they might develop a citywide program based on our experience, from HOA disaster to citywide model in 18 months. Not bad for a neighborhood that used to depend entirely on one guy with a generator and some extension cords. I still live in the same house, still enjoy my solar panels and batteries, still participate in HOA meetings when important issues come up. Mr. Kowalski is running for re-election unopposed, which tells you everything you need to know about how people feel about his leadership compared to Patricia's. My basement has never flooded, not once in 7 years of living here. My sump pumps run reliably, powered by grid electricity during normal times and battery backup during outages. I sleep well during storms, knowing that my house is protected, and my neighbors have taken responsibility for protecting their own homes. The Honda generator sits quietly in my garage, an artifact of a different time when I was the neighborhood's sole source of backup power. It is clean, maintained, and ready for service, but it mostly just sits there. My batteries handle everything now, silently and efficiently, exactly as I told Patricia they would. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if she had simply talked to me about the noise complaints instead of implementing a blanket ban. Maybe I would have repositioned the generator differently, or run it on a lower load setting, or worked out a communication system with sensitive neighbors. Maybe we could have solved the problem cooperatively instead of through conflict. But that would have required Patricia to see me as a neighbor rather than a subordinate, to value collaboration over control, to recognize that heavy-handed regulation often creates worse problems than it solves. Those were abilities she simply did not possess. So instead, we went through the fire of conflict and came out tempered and stronger. My generator got banned. I went silent. Their sump pumps failed, and the neighborhood learned a harsh but valuable lesson about the difference between authority and leadership, between compliance and cooperation, between rules and relationships. I am glad it happened. I am glad Patricia overreached. I am glad the April storm flooded basements and destroyed property, because that tangible damage was the only thing that could break through the neighborhood's apathy and force real change. Sometimes things have to break before people will fix them. My solar panels glint in the afternoon sun as I write this, generating power, charging batteries, preparing for the next outage. The system has performed flawlessly for nearly 2 years now. The return on investment will take another 8 years at current electric rates, but that was never really the point. The point was resilience, independence, and proving that there are always solutions beyond the ones that HOA boards can comprehend. Patricia tried to silence my generator. She succeeded in a way, but in doing so, she sparked a revolution that made generators unnecessary for me and essential for everyone else. She tried to assert control and instead lost everything. She tried to punish one homeowner and instead unified an entire neighborhood against her leadership. The lesson, I suppose, is that power in a community does not come from rules and regulations, but from trust and competence and genuine service to others. I had power in this neighborhood not because of any formal authority, but because I provided a valuable service that people needed. When Patricia took that away, the neighborhood chose my side, not because they liked me particularly, but because they understood who had been serving the community and who had been serving their own ego. My generator is silent now, but the neighborhood hums with the sound of distributed backup systems, each household taking responsibility for its own resilience. That is a better outcome than I could have designed, born from conflict, but ultimately producing something more sustainable than my old extension cord charity. The next storm will come eventually. Milwaukee always gets hammered by severe weather a few times each year. When it does, my batteries will kick in seamlessly, my house will remain powered, and my neighbors will manage their own backup systems with the competence they have developed over the past 2 years. And if someone's system fails and they genuinely need help, I will pull out my Honda generator, wheel it to my backyard, and run extension cords to their house, because that is what good neighbors do. Not because an HOA demands it, not because a board requires it, but because it is the right thing to do. Patricia tried to regulate neighborly assistance and destroyed it. The new board created space for it to flourish. That difference in approach is everything. The dividing line between communities that thrive and communities that merely comply with regulations while slowly dying inside. I chose to live in this neighborhood because I wanted community. Real community, where people help each other and solve problems cooperatively. Patricia's generator ban nearly killed that spirit, but ultimately it strengthened it by forcing people to recognize what they were losing and fight to reclaim it. So here I am, nearly 2 years after that confrontation in my driveway, living in a better neighborhood with better leadership and better emergency preparedness. My generator is silent, my batteries are charged, and my basement is dry. Patricia is gone, her authority vanished like morning mist. The HOA continues, but transformed into something actually useful rather than merely regulatory. And when the next power outage hits, when the next storm hammers Milwaukee with rain and wind and lightning, I will sit in my powered home and smile, knowing that this time I am not the only one prepared. This time, the whole neighborhood has learned the lesson that Patricia tried so hard to prevent us from learning. That resilience comes from preparation, that community comes from cooperation, and that the best backup systems are the ones you install yourself rather than depending on someone else's generator and extension cords. The story ends where it began, with a generator and an HOA and a homeowner who understood electrical systems better than the board understood governance. But now the generator is one of many, the HOA is functional rather than destructive, and the homeowner is part of a genuine community rather than a lone provider propping up an unprepared neighborhood. Patricia banned my generator noise during outages. I went silent. Their sump pumps failed. And from that failure grew something better than what existed before. Sometimes that is how progress works, through conflict and consequences, and the hard lessons that only flooded basements can teach. My Honda EU 7000 IS sits in the garage, quiet and patient, waiting for the next time it will be needed. Not to power the whole neighborhood, but to help one family in genuine need. That is enough. That is appropriate. That is sustainable. The age of Owen Valmont's neighborhood electrical charity is over, replaced by distributed resilience and individual responsibility. It is a better system, even if it took a vindictive HOA president and thousands of dollars in flood damage to create it. The sun sets over Riverside Heights, and my solar panels finish another day of generation, having produced 62 kilowatt-hours of clean energy. My batteries stand ready at 97% charge. My sump pump cycles quietly in the basement. My refrigerator hums. My house is an island of prepared resilience in a neighborhood that has finally learned to prepare for itself. And somewhere in Phoenix, Patricia Wainwright is probably trying to ban someone else's generator, never understanding that the problem was never the noise. The problem was always her approach, her inability to balance legitimate concerns with practical necessity, her preference for control over cooperation. She could have been remembered as a good HOA president who solved problems. Instead, she is remembered as the woman whose generator ban flooded the neighborhood. History is written by the victors, they say. But in HOA disputes, history is written by whoever keeps their basement dry. And in that telling, I won not by fighting, but by going silent and letting natural consequences teach the lessons that Patricia refused to learn. My generator noise bothered people, so I eliminated the noise. Their sump pumps failed, so they learned why the noise had been necessary. Cause and effect, as predictable as Ohm's law, as inevitable as water following gravity down to where it always flows. The path of least resistance. I went silent. They flooded. We all learned. The end.